The METUS Tech Show.
Welcome to the METUS Tech Show, a show for HVAC professionals by HVAC professionals.
The METUS Tech Show.
So, Sean, you were talking to me earlier, and you were saying that your wife started making some kind of homemade ramen dish. Tell me about that.
Absolutely. So, kind of during COVID, we got into just kind of mixing some stuff up, working with what we had in the house. And I was always a big fan of ramen noodles. And so we started to use that. And so she found this recipe.
You're talking about those packaged ramen noodles that I used to call them. When my wife and I first got married, we called them 10-cent soups, but now they're like 30-cent soups, right?
Yeah, inflation.
Yeah, the old college survival kit.
Yeah, I highly recommend you boil them first.
Yes.
It's not a cracker. No, it's terrible that way.
In a pinch it could be, but no. Okay, so I'm sorry, continue.
So what we wound up doing is we wound up boiling and straining the ramen like you normally would, depending upon, but not mixing in that sauce packet, which is predominantly salt.
Yeah, and MSG.
Correct, all the good stuff.
Yeah.
So we take that. But then what she would do is she took broccoli florets and really broke them down a bit more, really diced them, and then sauteed those with chicken. I guess you could do it with shrimp or maybe any other flavor of ramen that you can imagine.
Any protein would work, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
So she took that, sauteed that up with a little bit of EVOO, extra virgin olive oil for those that aren't Rachel Ray fans, and got that going, and then introduced it to the ramen with a little bit of soy sauce, some sesame seeds. It's so simple, but it's so good. And if you're like me, I'm a big fan of leftovers, and it's just as good the next day, cold, as it is hot right off the stove.
That sounds delicious.
It is.
Yeah, it does sound good.
I was actually reading, you reminded me, I was following a recipe one time, and it said 2 teaspoons of EVOO. I'm like, what the heck is EVOO?
EVOO?
I asked my wife, do we have any EVOO? She goes, there's no such thing. I go, the recipe calls for it. Well, my wife, like you, is Irish, so I won't repeat what she said, but basically she said, you moron, it's extra virgin olive oil. I said, okay, that we have. Why didn't it just say extra virgin olive oil? Yeah. Anyway, so that sounds delicious. I can't wait until you bring some in for us.
Absolutely.
All right.
It reminds me of the one I just tried to make. I tried to do the same thing and copy the METUS ramen.
Yeah.
And I did the same thing. I cooked the ramen noodles from the package, didn't use the salt packet, put some pork belly in there and some vegetables and everything, but nothing touches METUS.
Yeah. Sean, are you familiar with the ramen place in Swanee? Have you been there?
I have.
Have you had their ramen, the ultra spicy?
I haven't had the ultra spicy.
Do you like spice?
I do, in moderation. All things in moderation.
Yeah. So basically, I know the people listening are probably sick of hearing about Omaito, but it is, I've said this on many of episodes, it's my favorite meal in the whole country. But the thing is, it comes on levels are 1 to infinity. And I've been as high as 5, and I've had the 5, and that was pretty smoking hot. So I get the 2 now because I've had the 2 on a Tuesday, and I've had it again the same week on a Thursday, and one has been much hotter than the other. If the cook is angry, if he's not paying attention, a 2 can be a 5. So if you screw up a 2, I can still eat it. But if you make a 5 too hot, I'm afraid I'll die. So
this is important information.
Yes. And we've actually had a former colleague of ours who tried a level 10, and he ate the whole thing, and he went home and he wasn't feeling well. But I think he's moved on.
When you say former...
He's not dead. He just left the company.
He made it. Yeah.
Was worried for a second.
Yeah, no, he was pretty sick. So anyway, welcome everybody to the METUS Tech Show. Thank you for listening. My name is Paul Shavs. With me is
Bryn Raptor.
And joining us today is Sean Gallagher. Sean, tell us who you are, what you do, your role here, and we'll go from there.
Super. Thanks for having me today, guys. My name's Sean Gallagher. I'm a regional sales manager for Mitsubishi Electric, taking care of Eastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And here today, we're going to be talking about when is a service call not a service call.
Yeah. So this is an important topic because I think all 3 of us have been at one time or another in a truck. Yep. All 3 of us have been at one point or another in the tech support, and all 3 of us have been in the training side of things. So, and as a technician, I know that there are certain things that you never should have been on, or you never should have put a whole lot of effort into that. So let's kick that off because this is a topic, it's near and dear to my heart. It's something, and I always like to say, you know what, it's one thing to learn from your own mistakes. That's valuable. But if you can learn from somebody else's mistakes, that's easier. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some of the mistakes that we've made, that people made. And let's talk about a real service call first. Right? What are some of the things a technician needs to know? They show up on a service call, and I'd say there's an actual issue they're going to be working with. Give us some pointers on what that technician should be looking for.
So generally on a real service call with a piece of Mitsubishi equipment, let's talk about ductless because it's the vast majority of what we work with. Not that we don't have ducted options, but with a ductless model or high or low wall mount, we're going to have generally a series of flashing lights. The indoor unit would have green lights and the outdoor unit may have red and yellow. If it's a branch box style unit, it may be exhibiting a 4-digit code, or if it's a P series, it might be exhibiting a letter and a number. But that's pretty big giveaway that there's actually something wrong with the system, is seeing one of those error codes.
Right. And that's important because the error codes tell you a lot. And when I was training, I used to tell the students, when you show up, don't touch anything. Don't turn anything off. Don't turn anything on. Look at the lights, see what the lights are doing. And now we have the ability, you don't just write it down. You can actually record it with your phone, because I think 99.9% of technicians have some type of recording device they could use. And let's look at those lights. And then what's the next step?
The next step is to go to mylinkdrive.com and either download the technical service manual to see what those lights mean, or if you're very adept at this, you may have some of those codes memorized.
Yeah, and some of them you can actually find inside the panel for the outdoor unit. Sometimes it'll tell you what they are, but it's just going to be a high level. And the one thing I like to tell people is be careful when you're looking through the manual, because the first set of fault codes you're going to see are not what we call active fault codes. They're part of the failure mode recall. And I don't want to go down that road of failure mode recall for this episode, but that basically tells you the last fault the unit had. Mm-hmm. And if that's flashing 3 times for that, it's not the same. It doesn't mean the same thing as if it's flashing 3 times and it's an actual in-progress fault. So that's important.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah, MyLink Drive is the way to go.
All right.
You actually had just mentioned, you said the fault codes tell us a lot. Realistically, they don't tell us a heck of a lot. It's MyLink Drive that does. We can take that error code, bring it to MyLink Drive, and that's where we get a lot of our information.
Right, but without that error code, we don't know where to look.
Dead in the water.
Right. And the thing about our manuals is the way that they're set up, and I haven't looked at one in a while, so hopefully this won't be a bold-faced lie. But you'll have the flash code, and it'll give you a high-level 1-sentence, 2-sentence description of what it is. And then it'll give you a reference, and it'll have a number or a letter. That means look further down in that manual. It may be 2 or 3 or 5 pages down, and then it's going to give you the specific section where there's a flow chart. Mm-hmm. And then it says, measure this, and then it's a yes or no. And you follow, answer the question appropriately, and it brings you to the right thing.
Absolutely.
All right. So when is a service call not a service call then? That's a real service call. So when is it not a service call?
So in my mind, a service call and a service technician is someone that's taking over after the installation at some point, because the either real or perceived issue that the homeowner is experiencing is bothering them, and they're there to do something about it. Now, when a service call is not a service call, one of the biggest times is when it's an applications issue. Mm-hmm. That service technician can be the best of the best, but if it's an applications issue, if that equipment is misapplied, or if the expectation was not matched between the homeowner and the comfort consultant, then we can have multiple umpteen service calls and never resolve the issue because that service call is not a service call.
Yeah, and typically, and not always, but typically that, in my experience, that happens when it's customer, the end user is frustrated with their existing company that put it in, they're getting nowhere, then they call somebody else. Once in a while, it's been my own company, my own installers, because we're all human. We make mistakes. But the majority of the time, in my experience, it's been, I've tried these other people. They put it in. They couldn't fix it. Give it a shot. And then it's like, stepping outside of ductless for a minute, I was just telling Mike Capuccio, who you know, happens to be here this week doing some training, and I was talking to him. There was a plumber in my area who got into the air business. And no matter when he was replacing a furnace and a condensing unit, doesn't matter what size plenum he had on there, it was 100,000 BTUs in a 5-ton outdoor unit. Right? And there have been times when it's like there's a 14 by 8 trunk line coming off of the plenum. And it's like, yeah, that's not good. It's a little noisy, but those are the things you can't really do anything about at that time. But you can have solutions, but it's not a solution for the service tech.
Correct.
Right.
Because that service tech is not going to rework that ductwork on that service call.
Yeah, there's just no way. Right. So let's go back to our stuff, the ductless. So like you said, we do have ducted, but let's focus on ductless for right now. What are the other things that a technician should know? This is not a service call.
Mode. I recommend, especially with multi-zone units, prior to the end of the sales process, after the installation, I think it's very important that somehow that company express to the homeowner what the heat pump is going to do, how it's going to be different than their previous heating system. If I could give you an example, a friend of mine just put in a 5-zone unit with a branch box. He utilized the Mass Save financing as well as the rebate. He's very happy, but he's going from a hydronic system, forced hot water, to using this as his only source of heat. When it was installed, he wound up with 5 remote controllers in his hands. And
that's like heaven for most guys.
Well, he also has 3 children in the house,
there you go.
all under 5.
Oh, boy.
So one of the things I did is I took the time to sit down with him. A friend installed it who was an HVAC contractor. But I said, let's sit down and talk about this, because the friend who's the HVAC contractor is probably going to get a phone call, or I'm going to get the phone call. And that's not a service call.
Right.
Let's talk about what you can expect. So the first thing I did is I said, you have 5 remote controllers. You can use one because they're all the same indoor head. You can use one of these. The other 4 can go in a drawer. And because you have, small children that are prone to button pushing and things like this, you may want to set one and, set them all with one controller. And that way there you have them all in the same mode at the set point that you want. And I also explained to him, I said, you have some small bedrooms here and you have, 10 by 10 bedrooms. And the indoor units might be slightly oversized for that. So you're going to experience some temperature swings. That's not a service call. That's application related. He didn't want to spring for a ducted system and reworking the whole house. So he understood the ramifications of that, and he's willing to live with that. We also talked about mode. Everything has to be in heat or everything has to be in cool. And I took the opportunity to show him what the indoor unit, when it's placed, let's say all the units are in heat and one is placed in cooling, what that's going to react like, how he's going to see that slow flash. And we talked about flash codes earlier. That slow flash sometimes can mimic the fast flash of a communication
Yeah, a
error.
one-time flash.
Absolutely.
It's hard to tell the difference unless you see them both. It's a one-time flash, and you'll start going down that rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm. And I would recommend, or I would liken that one unit being out of sync with the rest of the system, one being in a different mode, to that same service call that you might have gotten in the middle of the night. I have no heat. Well, did you check the service switch, the emergency switch at the top of the stairs? That's something really quick before someone goes out there that they can rectify, where a service call doesn't have to be a service call.
Yeah. Quick digression here. I was on call the first Super Bowl that the Patriots won. Right? Super Bowl starts at 6:30, 6 o'clock, whatever it is, and obviously it's a Sunday. And about 6:45, the pager goes off. I call the customer, and it's Sunday night. He's about 45 minutes away. He says, I've got no heat. So I'm trying to save a trip. I explained to him, if you can wait till tomorrow, there won't be, the after hours charge and so on. He goes, no, come out tonight. All right, so let's go through some things. Check this switch. In some of these old houses in New England, even if they are gas, they still have that red plated switch at the top of the cellar stairs to turn off. And I go, let's try that. Let's try this circuit breaker. Okay, all right, everything's fine. And earlier he told me the heat had been out all day, but he decided to wait till 6:45 to call. So I said, all right, listen, I'm kind of busy. I'm tied up. I won't be able to get there for several hours, but I'll get there. He said, all right, bring a flashlight. I'm like, why? He goes, well, we have no electricity. I said, how long have you had no electricity? Well, since about 10 o'clock this morning when the heat went out. I said, you need electricity for the system to work. He goes, oh, no, it's gas. I know, I shouldn't say this, but had I actually gone out there and missed the Super Bowl, I think I'd have hit him. I might have.
We might be in a different position today had you done that.
Yes.
So I'm glad that you took your time.
But the important thing is let's, ask those questions before we go out there. And to the example that you were giving, where they're in mixed modes, right? That end user has probably been told at some point, hopefully, that they all have to be in the same mode, not mold. But if the dispatcher misses that, you as a technician, should, if you know it's a multi-zone call them up ahead of time and say, can you make sure they're all in the same mode? Because if I come out there and it's just the fact that it's a user setting, then I have to charge you for it, and I don't want to do that. So just double check. I'll wait for you to call me back. If I don't hear from you in the next hour, then I'll assume you're going to cancel. Right? And that usually saves a trip.
That's just great customer service.
Yeah.
Explaining, if I darken your doorstep, there's going to be a fee associated with it. There's a couple things you can try real quick on your own. And, a lot of times that will help out, especially in these mixed mode situations, things like that.
Another thing that was pretty common, a lot of electrical inspectors require you to put a service switch at the indoor unit. So we have the TAZ switch. It's a 3-pole switch that goes on the wall someplace near the indoor unit. If that switches off momentarily, whether the unit is calling or not, whether it's heating, whether it's cooling, you lose communication, and you don't get communication back until when, Bryn?
Until you have that switch turned on, you're going to have to do a power cycle, though. So we have a power-up sequence. That's the most important part of it.
Yeah, you got to turn the switch back on and then power off and power on the outdoor unit and let it establish communication. That is a trip that you can save too. And ask them, is there a possibility? Is there a switch? There's a possibility anybody touched that switch. I've saved a dozen or so service calls over the years just by asking them those questions.
Yep.
And listen, we're in business to make money. That's why anybody's in business, and this customer service thing. But at the end of the day, the truck's got to get paid for. The technician's got to get paid. But a technician does not like to charge a customer for something like that. But we don't really have a choice. We made a trip out there. There's a charge just for showing up at your door, right? And that always made me feel bad. I just flick a switch. Well, we're shut off.
Yeah, and then they go, "Do I still have to pay you?" Yeah, unfortunately you do.
Yeah.
But going back to what you were saying, managing the expectations of that end user is 90% of avoiding those non-service service calls, because especially up here in the Northeast, we've been used to hydronics-based systems or even, warm air furnaces. When that unit is satisfied, our thermostat satisfied, our warm air furnace shuts off. The fan shuts off. With our wall mounts, they don't. And so you want to avoid those service calls of, hey, my unit won't shut off. That's part of the function. And if we don't do the legwork in the beginning to explain to the customer how these things actually operate, you're going to get all those non-service calls.
Sure.
So
as you mentioned, that fan, that's a great one. For someone who's new to a ductless offering, that's the what, but knowing the why, having the right technician, the right training, and being able to establish that confidence with that homeowner, letting them know that, yes, this is normal operation. We'll get back to that in just one moment, but this is normal operation. And the reason for it, yes, this runs the fan continuously to eliminate hot and cool spots in the room. It's in some instances, it's moving the air over, always over filters. So you're actually cleaning the air as you're doing it. There's a benefit to that happening.
Yeah. And that's where the temperature is being sensed, is typically at the indoor unit, not at a thermostat like a conventional system, to Bryn's point.
Correct. So that question comes up quite a bit.
Yeah. And just one thing too, it's also a good company is going to have the installer or maybe even the salesperson is going to come back, but somebody's going to sit with that customer. They got a new piece of equipment they've never had before. It's going to build so much of a great relationship and so much trust, and it's going to get you referrals. If you spend time with that customer and just explain everything, explain the remote control. I remember putting these in, and you take out the remote control, and when there was a couple, a husband and wife, the husband's eyes would light up, another control, and the lady of the house would have the same reaction. She'd roll her eyes and say, "Oh, great, another remote control," right? But they appreciate that. That just it takes 20 minutes, a half hour tops. Sit down, explain things, and go over it, and you won't get those calls. You'll get a happy customer. Because if they have to call and they perceive that there's an issue, they're going to think it's you or the equipment that you put in. So you're going to avoid all that.
Absolutely. And getting back to that normal operation, nice part is that on mylinkdrive.com under Tech Tips, we have videos, one aptly titled Normal Operation.
Normal operation, yeah.
where it talks about, what to expect when you have a heat pump. It goes over all the kind of subtleties of owning a heat pump and the function that goes along with it. To your point about the controllers, we also have a video on what all the little buttons do on the controllers that really helps out. Now, what I've seen a lot of contractors do is even just sending that as a follow-up to the installation, sending those emails over or an email over with both of those for the homeowner to peruse at their leisure to say, okay, yeah, I've noticed it did that. Evidently, this is, how this works.
Yep.
And also we were talking about this earlier. There's an operation manual. That's a manual for the end user. And by the way, another sidebar is all the manuals that come with the equipment have to stay with the equipment on the job site. You don't use them as knee pads and then throw them away when you're done. And that's a legal thing. They belong to the end user, so leave them there. But it's the operation manual has a page at some point, and it says, when you think that trouble has occurred, and it lists a whole bunch of things to check first. Let's go through some of the more common ones.
Sure. So sound is one that comes up quite a bit. Now, this is when we talk about the construction of this equipment, it really becomes clear when you have these conversations that this is, let's talk about the high wall mount. High wall mount unit is going to be a copper coil with aluminum fins wrapped inside a plastic shell. And
on a wood frame.
On a wood frame.
Wall with drywall.
Correct. Thermal expansion is something that's going to happen. So there's going to be clicks, ticks, pops, cracking noises, things like that. All very similar to if you've ever experienced a house with hydronic baseboard. As that baseboard heats up and cools down, you're going to hear that. If you've ever experienced a house with an oil burner, the wall mount thermostat clicks, tick, and then you hear the hum of the burner. Maybe it's going through the pre-purge cycle. If you're listening to these things, you're going to hear those. Our equipment is very quiet, whisper quiet. Some of the quietest equipment in the industry, but nothing with moving parts is silent.
Right.
So that expectation that the equipment is quiet is reasonable. That the equipment is silent is not. And there will be thermodynamic sounds that go on with this. Now, as you mentioned, there's a section in the owner's manual. And I highly recommend that people read the manual. There's an acronym that you brought up earlier.
Yes, I actually got this from Ralph Wolf. I think we all know Ralph Wolf. He's with Ferguson down in the Carolinas. He lives in one of the Carolinas. I can't remember which one. But he's one of the nicest people, one of the smartest people I know. But it's RTFM, and the way he puts it is read the fantastic manual. Which is not how I heard it originally, because it was one of those acronyms that's been around for years. It's like, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. It's, anyway. But yeah, the manual is a good thing. So read the fantastic manual, and thank you, Ralph Wolf, for that.
Yeah. So some of the other things that a burbling sound is heard, a cracking sound is heard, the sound of water flowing is heard. I'd like to talk about that one as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that one, because that one is, and I got my little experience with that too, some stories that I can tell, but let's go on with that one.
So in my house, I've got a low wall mount KJ, and I have about 60 foot of line set on this, and I've got it dialed right in. I've weighed the charge in, and the line runs up underneath, it drops down through the floor and goes across the ceiling of the garage below the occupied space, and then drops down the wall of the garage and goes outside to the condensing unit about 60 feet away. Well within the specs of that unit, the KJ18. And so if it's very quiet in the garage, I can hear the hiss of refrigerant flowing through the piping. Okay. And I make sure that when I do training classes that people are aware of that, because we have, it's simple hydronics. You're pushing a liquid refrigerant through this small diameter piping, and there's going to be a sound associated with that. Similar to when you turn the shower on in the morning. If you were someplace else in the house, you might hear the water flowing through the pipes.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. And you said when it's very quiet, you hear it. And I think I've brought this up on previous episodes, but I have a digital thermostat in my house because I have an air heat pump. I have a Train XI13, I think it's like 22, 23 years old. But it's a digital thermostat. And during the day, when there's regular noises throughout the day with 2 kids, a dog and 2 cats and a wife and 7 chickens outside, you don't always hear it. But at night, even though this thing is down the hall from my bedroom, if I have the door open, click. And then I feel the air, and then click. And then, every so often. So it's not that it got louder. It's just that everything got quieter. So just because you don't hear it during the day and you hear it at night, it's not because it wasn't there during the day.
Mm-hmm.
Again, something we can explain to the end user.
Yep. Yeah, other ones that I have on here is the operation stops for about 10 minutes in the heating operation. Why would we see that? Is that a service call?
Shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be.
I think that would be related to defrost.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be the same people that call up and say, there's smoke coming out of my unit, but you got smoke or steam? Well, it looks more like steam. That's good.
Yes. It means we're functioning.
Yeah.
And that's addressed in the normal operation video.
Right. Yeah, that's good.
Something that I always like to bring up when you're in that situation, Paul, you mentioned being on call. I like to use the journalistic approach, which is the who, what, why, where, when, and how. So if somebody gives me a call and I want to know what equipment they have, and we're going to be focusing on Mitsubishi equipment, obviously today. How long ago was the system installed? What's the chief complaint? Let's say the chief complaint is not heating. Well, we certainly could look at mode at that point, right? Make sure it's in the heating mode. If it is in the heating mode, is this a single zone or multi-zone? That's the what. Well, what's a single zone versus a multi-zone? They may not know. Maybe these are renters, something like this. Do you have multiple indoor units? Well, I do. Okay, let's go with those other ones and make sure that they're all in the same mode that you're in, because the one they're trying to use may be the offending system that's out of step.
Yep.
You could travel a long way to find that out. The why. Maybe someone's trying to use heat in the middle of the summer, or they're looking at the symbols on the older controllers and they're looking at the sun and they think it's a snowflake and things like that. So, what's going on with that as well, and walking them through that, making sure that every little step is taken before you wind up going out on that service call.
Yeah. And once you show up, this is something you mentioned to me years ago. Once you show up on the service call, and it's one of those noise things, and it's a normal noise, and there's nothing wrong with the equipment. Once you, the technician, start taking the equipment apart and start trying to figure out what's wrong and diagnosing it, in that end user's brain, in their mind, you're trying to fix a problem.
You're recognizing a problem.
Yeah, so that's what you can't do, because if it's something you can't do anything about, if it's an obvious, hey, this thing is way undersized and it's not heating well and it's single digits outside and it's doing all it can, then that's it. But once you start throwing gauges on, which I don't recommend, should be one of the first 10 things you do should not be that. Right? But you're just telling the customer, there is a problem. I agree with you. I'm going to find it. So don't do that.
Yeah, eliminate all the obvious first, right? We don't ever really want to put gauges on there unless we are pretty positive at that point, after all of our testing, that we have a refrigerant leak.
Right. And we mentioned Mike Capuccio earlier.
Yep.
Right. We did a podcast with him not too long ago where he talked about capacity, 1.08 times a delta T. Let's do that before you throw gauges on. Let's see what it's doing. Let's see what it's doing compared to what it should be doing. Let's pull out that manual and let's see what it's rated for, what temperatures, what should we have for the CFMs, and let's look at all that.
Another issue that we do see come up are real versus perceived issues. Those can be some of the hardest to explain away. If someone feels that this system is not doing what it was designed to do or intended to do, as an example, maybe they're not feeling the air across the room, something like that. You can go ahead and look up on our submittals, the airflow, how far that unit's going to push air both in heating and in cooling with a wet and a dry coil. So as an example, with maybe our FS12, if you have a wet coil in air conditioning mode with condensate running down it, you may see about 23 feet of airflow or throw from that fan. But if you have a dry coil in heating mode, you might see closer to 30.
Yeah, that makes a difference. And it's the same things. I used to get those service calls, not necessarily with mini splits, but in general, hey, I just turned on my air conditioner and it's 2:00 in the afternoon and I waited a half hour and it's still hot in my house and it's 85 degrees outside. Well, those are the things you got to set. It's doing what it's designed to do. Another thing, just to talk about furnaces for a little bit, another thing used to be common. These people would remove these big, giant, inefficient gas furnaces where the air temperature coming out of there would be well over 100 degrees.
That's a big one.
Yeah, you put in a high efficiency one, and what's the air temperature? It's going to be a lot lower than it was. It's a lot more efficient. You're not going to feel that hot air. It's a warm air furnace, not a hot air furnace. Some of those old gas furnaces in a big giant, heating chamber in there.
Gravity hot air.
Yeah, those would throw out some serious heat. You put in a new furnace, which is going to make it more comfortable. It's not going to dry out as much. And that's something they used to, call about, which can't go out on that.
Yeah, like with our new IntelliHeat, that's something that they'll probably have to, again, manage the expectations of that end user and let them know if this is going on to replace something like an old oil furnace. The temperature of the air coming out of there is not going to be the same. That doesn't make it less efficient. It doesn't mean it's not working. It's just going to feel different. And it's something that you have to make them aware of.
Yeah, I think 30 years ago I was fixing appliances. And that's one thing when people would buy a brand new refrigerator and they'd have that 30, 40, or 50-year-old fridge. This thing runs longer. I go, yeah, it does. And they're designed to do that. They're designed to run longer, but they do save energy in the long run. It's just, you don't see the lights dim every time the refrigerator comes on.
Which is, something to do with our soft start feature. The previous air conditioning unit came on, it was possibly contactor based. That contactor pulled in, the compressor and the outdoor fan motor came on full bore. You probably see those lights dim with a 100 amp service. Our soft start, that's not going to happen. That can lead to questions. Hey, why doesn't it do that anymore? Is it on?
Yeah.
Questions like that, which should probably not be service calls. Cooling and heating.
I've gotten a service call like that. I've actually gone on a service call because I didn't read it before I went out there, and it's not running, right? And it was what came before the FH? Was it FE?
Before the FH was an FE.
I think it was even before the FE, but
that
it was
an FD.
FD. That's what it was years ago. But the customer said, "Yeah, I got there. It says the outdoor unit's not running." And I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Well, how's the temperature of the house?" "Well, the house is fine." I said, "The outdoor unit has to be running." But you know what? When I walked up to it and it was running, I didn't know it was running because they're so quiet until you have to be right on top of it and in front of it to hear that air. But those things outdoors are nice and quiet. You're talking about whisper quiet. But when I first went up, I said, "Yeah, it's not running," because he was used to a large condenser and I was used to a large condenser that you can hear from across the yard and the neighbors can hear it when it comes on. So those are all nice service calls to have.
Sure.
Yeah. Conversely, you may have, again, with our IntelliHeat, something that's, on top of a furnace, the fan may stop, but if you look outside, or maybe the fan is going at a low speed, you look at the outdoor unit, the fan's still going. And our systems, the efficiency comes from not having to be this on, heavy, high-capacity cycle every single time. We want to kind of coast. And so, I've had calls when I was in a van where they're like, my outdoor unit never shuts off. It's like, realistically, we don't want it shutting off all the time. We kind of want to be in coasting, at a lower hertz than having this steep on-off cycle at that, less efficient mode.
I'm going to vent a little, but I bought a car last July, and every time I come to a stop sign, it shuts off. And I hate that feature on a car. You have to push a button every time you want it. Every time you start the car, you got to push that button. But the most wear and tear is done on a motor when it starts and stops. And they know that. And they go, well, the sales guy was like, well, it really saves on fuel. It's going to save you a lot of money in the long run on fuel. And it's going to cost me more on parts. Get rid of it. It's a horrible feature. Sorry.
I'd be interesting to see the data.
Yeah, it's all
what
cooked.
kind of efficiency?
It's all cooked up. And if you're listening from the Department of Energy, then I live in San Diego. All right. What else? Are we missing anything?
Well, I think all of this, or a lot of this, can be alleviated through education. So here at Mitsubishi, I think we can all agree that we really stress education. We have actually had education for contractors in this country the longest of any ductless HVAC manufacturer since 2000.
Yep.
So we're looking at 24 years of education that we're very proud of. We've got education, everything from the quick little videos like we mentioned earlier, normal operation and the function of the buttons on our tech tips videos, all the way up to our e-learning, which anybody can have access to. They just need to contact their local Mitsubishi sales territory manager from their supply house. That territory manager will get a hold of a regional or area manager like myself. We'll get them added in. All we need is a first name, last name, and a unique email address. We can sign them up for our LMS, or learning management system, where they can learn all about the function. And what that does is it establishes confidence not only in the technician, but when the technician verbally shares that with the homeowner. I'm a Mitsubishi technician. I've taken the 2-day class, the M&P Installation and Service Essentials, perhaps the Advanced M&P class, and then perhaps the Advanced Residential Controls class. I've completed umpteen e-learnings online. this is what I specialize in. This is what I'm here today to help you with. And if you have questions, I can answer them. I can answer them correctly the first time.
Yeah, and we've also got some commercial classes and commercial training as well too. We do both, but any training in general is something. If you're a technician, if you're an installer, and you're in this trade, guess what? You can't just go to school and start working and never go to school again. Training is continuous, and it's so valuable, right? And if you're a manager of technicians, of HVAC techs, or HVAC installers, HVAC service guys, get them in the training, right? Make a deal with them. Look, if the training is after hours, I'll pay for the training, but the training is on you. The time is on you, right? And if you're a technician and you're not willing to attend training after hours unless you're getting paid, then if I'm the boss, I'm going to think twice about keeping people like that on, because you should want to learn. You should have a desire to learn and get better. You should be proud of what you do, because it's such a great field to be in. You learn so much. I used to tell folks, you learn a lot of plumbing, you learn a lot of electrical, you learn HVAC, but a plumber's not going to learn thermodynamics like you are. An electrician, you know how it is. You've been on sites before. It comes time to wire the thermostat. Electrician says, "I'll run the wire. You hook it up." And you get more. You understand more low voltage a lot more than they will. Not to, badmouth those trades. They're honorable trades. They're great trades. But this trade is unique in that sense that it involves other trades, and you get what's that? That side knowledge.
You get exposure to all trades.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for.
Other trades, you may get to specialize a little bit more in what you do, but we don't have that luxury as HVAC technicians. Yeah. You have to know your electrical. You have to know some plumbing. You have to know thermodynamics. Yeah. There's no way around it. I imagine. And also a little bit of construction, because if you ever, you go to mount a wall mount or a floor mount, you got to know how that building's constructed to get out of there in the right way.
I've always compared our trade to the medical field. Right, medical school gives you the general training, and then you're going to go into orthopedics or pulmonology or cardiology. And the same thing is here. The school that you get, and you should go to school, that gives you the tools necessary to learn the trade. And when new things come along and new technology comes along, if you've been a car mechanic for 30 years, and all of a sudden hybrid electric vehicles come along, you're not just going to work on them. You're going to have to go to training, and figure out how they work, which should be easier for you as an experienced mechanic than it will be for somebody coming off the street who knows nothing. I mean, gone are the days what we used to call them, shade tree mechanics. Mm-hmm. My brother's first car, I'm the youngest of 5 boys, and my middle brother had a 54 Ford. He could fit inside the hood. He could figure anything out that was in there, but you're not doing that today. No. Not on a 24 Ford, you're not.
No. And I see that the HVAC, our trade runs a little bit behind the automotive trade. It was the 80s when the check engine light came out, right? Well, we came out with that in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And our trade followed suit. A gas-fired furnace is going to have an indicator light that's going to flash to tell you the pressure switch was open. Yep. We're going to have an indicator light to flash to tell you that the thermistor is out of sync or something like that. So cars have been doing that forever. But again, to the point that you need to specialize, you need to have the right tools. MyLinkDrive.com is one of those tools, and it's free, provided to you by Mitsubishi Electric.
I will take the credit, though. As HVAC techs, we beat them to electrification.
This is true.
I'm still not buying a hybrid.
Just to recap, when it comes to when is a service call not a service call, managing the expectations of that end user is probably the biggest way to start. Make sure that when you are done with your install is not complete until you've had that conversation with the end user, managing their expectations, answering any questions that may exist. It could take a half hour to an hour. And that was what I did. If I got done with an install, I would show them that controller, show them how it worked, and then I'd hang out for a few minutes. Any questions they had about how that system was going to operate, that was part of the install, is making sure that they're comfortable with using it moving forward. And obviously use MyLink Drive, right? We've got many of things that will tell us what normal operation looks like, what may seem like a trouble, and how it could not be a trouble, how it could just be part of the normal operation. So
yeah, and get those manuals out.
Yeah,
give the operation manual to the end user, and when you need it, read that fantastic manual for servicing.
Read the fantastic manual.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Sean, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right,
thanks for having me, gents.
All right, so your wife has something in common with my wife and Steve's wife. They're all Jens.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah. So when is she going to make this, and when can we expect you to bring some of this ramen stuff in?
Well, what if I make it?
Well, I thought
You'll survive. You've had the level 5.
yeah. Okay. I
Just don't put broccoli.
Level
in it.
5.
You don't like broccoli.
And when broccoli, you know what?
The broccoli makes it. It's a big texture thing with me. The ramen with the broccoli and but the trick is get the small florets, cut them up small.
Yeah, no, broccoli
They
is-
take on the flavor of the soy sauce.
Yeah, it's a
sesame
vile weed,
seeds.
but I'll eat it. No.
Eat your veggies.
Yeah, I will not eat Brussels sprouts. I'm sorry.
More for me.
Just disgusting.
I love Brussels sprouts.
But you
Little
don't
balsamic in
it?
the oven on a cookie
eggs,
sheet.
so, yeah, my vote is out now. My opinion.
No, I don't like Brussels sprouts. Sorry, it's putrid.
Individual results will vary.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk to you later, Sean.
Bye bye.
Thanks, guys.